I want to take a little time here and talk about lesson 4 of the facility planning class, and there's just a couple things that I would like to go over. One of the things that I do want to mention is that, of course, we had the video with Al Eveland, and I may have mentioned it in the narrative, but Al Eveland passed away this last summer, and he was a good friend and did a lot for us as a financial agent, and also coming out to classes and speaking. And I'm sure he would be pleased, even though he's not around anymore, that we're using his information to help students to understand the not only the bond issue part of building, but also the campaign, some of the things that he talked about. Um, I think one of the things that he thought was important was, of course, how to select a fiscal agent, and he talked a lot about doing the interview and having hard questions. The other piece of advice that I would give you is to be sure and contact other schools that have used that particular fiscal agent. Talk to them about what kind of service they got, how often they came out during a campaign, those types of issues. And sometimes smaller schools, which many of you are in smaller school or probably will be as future superintendent, beginning your career in a smaller school, will find that if it's a smaller bond issue, you may not get the attention that you thought you deserved or should have had. I think most cases they do a pretty good job, but I would really emphasize checking up on those kinds of things. And Al talked a lot about some of the issues of a campaign, and I think important thing, understand in Nebraska that the architect normally does do most of the campaign planning. I'm sorry, I may have said architect. The fiscal agent, somebody in a position like Al even has, and they will be very involved in the campaign. In other states, usually it's the architect that helps with the plan, the campaign. But we found that both the fiscal agent and the architect were very important in passing a bond issue. And one of the things that the architect firm did is they brought people in that worked with different community groups. And we had a task force or planning task force that spent quite a bit of time determining what the school really needed. And that's really important that they do understand that it is a need, not a want, and it's not the administration's ego trying to get this bond issue passed. And in most cases, most people will tell you, is if you're the superintendent, is to be fairly low profile and be able to answer questions, but let your community groups do that. And he talked a lot about a common theme, and we had a common theme. We had 2 or 3 groups that would go out. Groups would be a couple people, and talk to the various community groups. But we did some rehearsals to make sure that they were giving the same information. And that can kill I had one person, I think I wrote this in it, who said that the building was not structurally sound, and obviously we had done a structural analysis, and there's a lot of things wrong with the building as far as electrical and those kinds of things, but structurally sound it was, and that could have really thrown us off. And I think you want to do as much of that as you can as far as following a theme and staying with it. The other one of the important things that I think was talked about, many of you mentioned, the whole bond issue process is somewhat confusing, and where the money comes and goes and those types of things. One thing I will tell you that a lot of students are not aware of: when you pass a bond issue, you get the money fairly quickly, and make sure that that money is invested. We did ours in the Nebraska Liquid Assets Fund, which means that you're making money, and you've got a fairly significant, $8 or $9 million in many cases, and that money's invested, so that takes care of a lot of expenses that you might have. So be aware of that. And then as the contractor completes the project, you'll have monthly payments, but you'll have that money for quite a while. So be aware that that can be very helpful. A lot of you, or not a lot of you, several of you mentioned that you hope this was covered in the finance class, and it will be. Our next session of finance can be taught by Dennis Poole, who's the Assistant Superintendent for Finance in the Omaha Public Schools and is a Kearney graduate. And I think he'll cover that quite well. So I think if you haven't had the finance class, you'll see that that information will be forwarded to you. So the last thing, some of you still are answering the questions and not putting the questions in there. And it's pretty easy to do, to just cut and paste from the assignment mode and then paste it in and then answer your questions. I have a lot of students, and they're in 3 different classes. And so, I got to remind myself, what chapter am I in? What are the questions? So I really appreciate it if you will put the questions in your response. So, and I hope you gain from this unit, and we'll go on and talk a little more about facility planning and campaigns, and hiring an architect is kind of an interesting section. So look forward to hearing from you later in the class.